You know that love that has never completely left you, the one that lives somewhere between memory and present, between what was and what still pulses when you least expect it. That love that is not the past, because something in it remains as alive as it was on the first day. And maybe you have tried to convince yourself that you have overcome it, that you have turned the page, that you have moved on. But then a song plays, a smell passes, a light hits a certain way through the window, and suddenly you are back in that moment as if no time had passed, as if the distance between now and then was just an illusion. And you realize with a clarity that hurts that some loves don't end because they never actually came to a true end. They simply turned into something you carry forever, not as an open wound, but as a permanent part of who you are. And Simone Weil, this French philosopher of just 34 who lived with an intensity that most don't experience in their entire lives, understood something about this strange nature of love that persists that no one before had been able to articulate. She saw that certain loves don't obey the normal laws of time. They don't follow the comfortable narrative of beginning, middle, and end that we try to impose on everything. Some loves exist outside these categories, in territory where absence is a form of presence and distance is a mode of closeness, and what she discovered about this persistence of love goes against everything we were taught about letting go, about closure, about the need for clean and definitive closure. Because maybe the truth is that some loves don't need to end for you to keep living. Maybe the whole problem is our modern obsession with clear, resolved endings when real life rarely offers that kind of tidy conclusion. Have you ever noticed how we spend so much time trying to force endings that may not be necessary? How we create elaborate farewell rituals when perhaps the most honest thing would be to simply recognize that some people remain with us even when they are no longer with us. Not in unhealthy attachment, but in abiding gratitude for having touched us in ways that changed who we fundamentally are. And Simone Weil did not have a long life, but she had deep loves that never really ended. Loves for truth, for beauty, for people who crossed her path and left marks that she carried until her last breath. And she transformed this experience of persistent love into a philosophy that helps us understand why your heart still holds space for someone who is officially no longer part of your life. Why you still feel that tightness in your chest when you think about that person. Why certain absences weigh more than presences. And if you feel that these words are naming something that you live but have never been able to express, if there is someone in your life or in your history who never really left, even though they are no longer here, then subscribe to this channel now, because let's explore together this delicate territory, where love transcends time and separation. Where Simone Weil teaches us that truly loving sometimes means carrying someone forever, not as a burden, but as part of who you have become. And you won't want to miss what comes next, because what she discovered about the nature of love that persists will completely change how you understand your own heart and the people who still live in it. The body forgets, but the soul holds what has no end. And perhaps it is exactly there, in that inexplicable persistence of certain loves, that we find something about our own nature that no modern psychology or superficial self-help can achieve. Something that only philosophers like Simone Weil, who have experienced love with an intensity that almost destroyed them, can really understand. And the first thing we need to understand, the first wound that we need to have the courage to look at directly without looking away, is that maybe you have been carrying someone inside you for years, maybe decades, and everyone around you has already told you that you need to get over it, that you need to move on, that you need to let go, and you tried. God knows that you tried. You did everything you were told to do. You went out with other people. You got distracted by work. You repeated mantras about healing and growth. You even managed to go days without thinking about that person. But then something happens, something small and seemingly insignificant, and suddenly you're back in that emotional place as if you never left, and the guilt sets in, the feeling that there's something wrong with you, that you should have gotten over it a long time ago, that your inability to let go completely is a sign of weakness or immaturity or attachment. Sick. But what if it's nothing like that? What if the persistence of that love within you is not a problem to be solved, but a truth to be recognized? And if some loves simply don't, they end because they touched something in you that is eternal, that is beyond the reach of time and physical separation. Simone Weil lost people she loved, lost connections that meant everything to her, went through separations that should have been final but never were. And instead of fighting this persistence, instead of trying to force a clean and complete breakup, she began to observe this experience with the radical attention that characterized everything she did. She asked herself why certain loves remain alive in us, even when all external circumstances have completely changed. Why the absence of certain people hurts more than the presence of others. Because you can be surrounded by people, but deeply miss someone who is not there. And what she saw was that true love creates something permanent, not in the sense of a relationship that lasts forever, but in the sense of transformation that never undoes. When you love someone deeply, when you allow that person to enter the most intimate layers of who you are, something happens that cannot be undone, simply because you separate. It is as if part of that person becomes intertwined with part of you so that there is no way to completely unravel without losing part of yourself in the process. And perhaps that is why certain separations never really end. Not because you are stuck in the past, but because that person has become part of who you are in the present. Your cells are completely renewed every 7 years. Your physical body of today does not share any molecule with the body that last hugged that person. But something in you remains marked, touched, transformed in a way that transcends physical matter. And Simone Weil would call this a mark on soul, not in the simplistic religious sense, but in the sense that there is a dimension of you that is beyond the body and time, a dimension where certain loves live eternally, not as a memory that fades, but as a presence that pulsates. And the pain you feel is not a sign that you need to heal. It is a sign that you truly loved. It is proof that you were capable of opening yourself completely to another person, of risking being transformed by someone, and that capacity is rare and precious. It is not a flaw to be corrected. You are not broken for still carrying someone inside you. You are human, deeply and completely human, and everyone who tries to convince you otherwise, every expert who promises infallible technique to let go completely, is either lying or has never loved intensely enough to understand that some loves simply don't obey the rules we try to impose on them. They exist in their own territory, they follow their own logic, and trying to force them to end when they don't want to end is like trying to stop the wind with your hands. It's a lost fight that only causes more suffering. But recognizing this, naming this truth, no, it means that you are condemned to live eternally stuck in the past. It means something very different, something that Simone Weil dedicated her entire life to exploring, and that is what we will discover together. Not how to let go of what does not want to be let go, but how to carry what persists in a way that does not destroy you. How to honor love that remains without letting it stop you from living fully. How to understand that the body can move forward while the soul still holds, and that this is not a contradiction, but the truth about the complex nature of human love. And now that we have named the hurt, now that we recognize that you are not alone in this experience of love that persists, we need to go deeper. We need to look at what is really happening when you miss someone years after you have been separated, when tears still come without warning, when your heart still quickens when you hear that person's name. And the first thing that Simone Weil would tell you, the first truth that she would insist that you recognize, is that your pain is legitimate, no matter how much time has passed, no matter what they say you should have gotten over, no matter if the breakup was yours. Choice or the other person's choice, the pain you feel is real and deserves to be acknowledged without judgment, without shame, without feeling that you are doing something wrong by still feeling it, because modern society has an unhealthy obsession with overcoming quickly, with the ability to move forward without looking back, with the idea that strength means not feeling, and Simone Weil saw through this brutal lie. She understood that real strength is not in not feeling, but in allowing yourself to feel completely while continuing to live. It is not in forgetting, but in remembering with love instead of bitterness. It's not about ripping someone out of your heart, but about making peace with their permanent presence there. And when you understand that, when you really absorb that truth, something changes. Not immediately, not dramatically, but slowly and deeply. You stop fighting yourself. You stop judging yourself for still feeling. You stop creating narrative. That of failure around the fact that that love still lives in you, and in that space that opens up when judgment stops, when self-flagellation stops, something new can begin to emerge. It's not forgetfulness. It's not indifference. It's something that Simone Weil would call purified love. Love that exists without the need for possession, without the requirement for physical presence, without the expectation of reciprocity. And that sounds impossible when you're in the midst of pain, when every cell in your body still screams for that person's touch, for their voice, for their way. How she looked at you. But Weil is not asking you to force this kind of purified love. She is saying that it can emerge naturally when you stop resisting the love that already exists, when you allow it to be what it is instead of trying to mold it into what you think it should be. And there is another truth that needs to be told. A truth that no one wants to hear, but that frees you when you finally accept it. And that is that maybe you are not missing the real person. Maybe you are missing who you were when you were with her, the version of yourself that had only existed in that relationship, of possibilities that died when the relationship ended, of a future that you imagined and that will never come true. And that doesn't lessen your suffering. It doesn't make your pain less valid, but it changes its nature, because if what you lost was a version of yourself, then what you need is not to recover the person, but to recognize and honor the part of you that died with the end of that relationship. And Simone Weil knew this deeply. She understood that every significant separation is also a form of death. Not literal death, but death of possibilities, of shared identities, of imagined futures. And our culture doesn't know how to mourn this kind of death. There is no funeral for a relationship that has ended. There is no social ritual to honor love that still exists but no longer has a form. There is no room for the complexity of loving someone you cannot or should not be close to. And in the absence of those rituals, in the absence of that social validation, you are left alone with your pain, trying to make sense of it in silence, trying to process something that perhaps cannot be fully processed, only lived, carried, integrated over time. And Weil would tell you that there's no problem with that you don't need a perfect closure, that life rarely offers clean endings, that most important stories simply stop without a definitive conclusion, and learning to live with this lack of conclusion, with this permanent ambiguity, is part of emotional maturity that our culture of instant gratification never teaches us. You want a clear answer. You want to know whether you should let go or hold on, whether you should forget or remember, whether you should look for someone or leave them alone. And Simone Weil offers you something much more difficult and much truer. She offers you the possibility of living in the tension between opposites, of simultaneously carrying love and absence, memory and present, connection and separation, without the need to resolve contradiction, because maybe contradiction is true. Maybe real love always exists in that paradoxical space where you simultaneously have and don't have, keep and let go, remember and forget. And when you accept this, when you stop trying to force clarity where there is none, when you consent to the mystery of love that persists, something extraordinary can happen. Not that pain disappears, but that you develop the capacity to carry pain without being defined for her, of living fully while part of you still inhabits that old love, of being true to the truth of your heart without letting it paralyze your life. And this takes us to deeper territory, to the place where Simone Weil really lived and thought. Because she wasn't just philosophizing about love in the abstract. She was trying to understand her own experience of loves that persisted beyond all logic, of connections that transformed her in ways she could never undo, even when the people involved were no longer present in her life, and what she saw when she looked at this persistence with radical attention that characterized all her work was that true love creates something that she called a mark on eternity, not in the simplistic religious sense, but in the sense that there is a dimension of reality where nothing that was genuinely loved can be lost, where every real connection creates something permanent, indestructible. And if that sounds too mystical, too abstract, consider your own experience. Think of the people who have marked your life in profound ways, even those who have been present for a short time. There is not something about them that remains alive in you, a way that transcends ordinary memory. It's not just that you remember them, it's that they somehow still inhabit you, influence your choices, appear in your dreams, echo in your words. And Simone Weil would argue that this is not just a psychological phenomenon. It's not just emotional memory. Strong end. It's something more fundamental about the nature of love and human connection. It's evidence that when we truly love, when we open ourselves completely to another person, we create something that exists beyond our individual lives, something that belongs to a different territory of reality, territory where time doesn't work the same way, where physical separation doesn't necessarily mean real separation, and she called it participation in the eternal. And before you dismiss it as vague mysticism, before you decide that it's a pretty but insubstantial metaphor, consider that perhaps Simone Weil is describing a real experience you had. But I never knew what to name. Those moments when the presence of someone who isn't there is so strong that it feels like you could reach out and touch. Those dreams where the dead or distant person is so vividly present that you wake up certain the encounter was real in some way you can't explain. Those impossible synchronicities when you think about someone and the phone rings, when you need a specific word of comfort and the song that plays has exactly that message. When connection between you and another person transcends all barriers of time and space in ways that make no logical sense. But they are unmistakably real to those who experience them, and Weil is not asking you to believe in anything. She is asking you to pay attention to the experience itself, to recognize moments when the love you feel for someone seems to come from a place deeper than personal emotion, when connection with another person seems to touch something universal, eternal, sacred. And these moments, however rare, reveal something about the real nature of love that ordinary superficial loves can never show. They show that true love participates in something greater than ourselves, that when we love deeply, we do not. We are just feeling private emotion, but touching fundamental reality about the nature of existence, about the fact that we are all connected in ways we don't normally realize. That separation between you and me is less absolute than it seems. That boundaries of individual identity are more porous than we realize. And when you love someone so deeply that they become part of you, you are directly experiencing this truth of interconnectedness. You are living evidence that we are not isolated islands, but waves in the same ocean. And Simone Weil lived this truth with an intensity that almost destroyed her. She loved people, ideas, causes with total devotion that kept nothing of herself. And many of these loves ended in painful separation, in death, in the impossibility of continuation. But she never treated these separations as true endings. She continued loving through absence, through distance, through even death. And not because she was incapable of letting go, but because she understood that real love does not end just because circumstances change. That love that touches eternity is not subject to the same rules that govern temporal phenomena. And this may sound like romantic escapism, as a refusal to accept reality. But in fact, it is the complete opposite, is the most radical acceptance of reality possible. Because reality includes not only what we can touch and see, but also what we feel and know in ways that transcend sensory perception. Reality includes love that persists, connections that survive separation, presence that inhabits absence, and to deny these experiences because they do not fit into a limited materialist model of reality is to refuse to see the totality of what is real, is to choose an impoverished version of existence where only what can count be measured and quantified. And Simone Weil spent a lifetime fighting against this impoverishment, insisting that we must pay attention to all dimensions of human experience, including those that make no sense to common logic but are unequivocally real to those who experience them. And when you do that, when you allow your experience of persistent love to be valid even when it doesn't make logical sense. When you recognize that a person who is no longer in your life can still be a living presence in your heart. When you accept that the love you feel does not need a present object to be real, you are opening the door to deeper understanding, not just of love, but of the fundamental nature of reality. And that takes us to the next level of understanding, the next layer of truth that Simone Weil discovered through her own painful experience of love that persists. And that is that this love that never ends has something specific to teach you, something that can only be learned through it, not in spite of it. And before we explore that lesson, before we dive into what this love has come to reveal, I need to know where you are watching me from now, what part of the world you are from. Seeking to understand this love that still lives in you, leave your city in the comments, aid your country, because there is something deeply comforting in knowing that all around the planet, right now, there are hearts like yours still keeping someone, still feeling this mysterious persistence of love that should have ended but didn't. And maybe Simone Weil, wherever she is now, would be touched to know that her words about the eternal nature of love still find those who need to hear them. So tell me from where you are watching us. And now let's get to what really matters, what this persistent love came to teach you. Because every love that remains in you carries a specific lesson, a message that can only be delivered through this persistence. And the lesson that Simone Weil saw is that true love teaches you to love without the need for possession, without the requirement of presence, without the expectation of reciprocity. It teaches you that it is possible to love purely, impersonally, in the sense that love exists for itself, and not because you need something in return. And this is revolutionary because most of what we call love is not real love, but disguised exchange. It is I love you because you make me feel good. I love you because you fill my emptiness. I love you because I am afraid of being alone. And there is nothing wrong with these needs. They are human and understandable, but they are not love in the deepest sense. They are forms of attachment, dependence, the search for completeness through another, and true love. Love that Simone Weil called supernatural because it transcends the selfish nature of the ego. It is different. It is love that exists without an agenda, without the need for return, without fear of loss because it has already accepted that possession was never possible from the beginning. And you learn this kind of love precisely through the experience of loving someone who is no longer available to you, of continuing to love through absence, of discovering that love can exist without a present object, that feeling can persist without hope of satisfaction. And at first it seems cruel. It seems like cosmic punishment. Why would you have to continue loving someone who cannot be with you? Why doesn't the heart just shut down when a relationship ends? Why would nature leave you with this love that has nowhere to go? But Simone Weil saw that this apparent cruelty is actually grace. In disguise, it is an opportunity to learn a higher form of love, to transcend need and expectation, to discover that you can love without possessing, without controlling, without demanding physical presence. And when you learn this, when you truly embody this lesson, something fundamental changes in how you relate, not just to the specific person who still inhabits your heart, but to everyone, your entire life, because you discover that you can love without fear of loss, that you can open up completely, knowing that love itself is the value, not its external circumstances. That real connection does not depend on physical proximity or continuity temporal. And this discovery frees you from so many fears that imprison most people. Fear of abandonment, fear of rejection, fear that love will go away if you don't hold on tight enough. You learn that true love cannot go away because it is not tied to circumstances. It does not depend on someone else continuing to love you back. It does not die when a relationship ends. It simply continues. It changes shape, perhaps. It becomes less urgent and more serene, less dramatic and deeper, but it does not disappear. And Simone Weil lived this in her own flesh. She loved people who could not love her in the same way, loved causes that failed, loved ideals that seemed impossible to achieve. But she never stopped loving, never allowed the impossibility of reciprocity or fulfillment to diminish the quality of her love, and not because she was masochistic or incapable of protecting herself, but because she understood that love is its own purpose, that the act of loving is already complete in itself, does not need a specific result to be valid. And when you understand this viscerally, when you live that instead of just thinking about it, your relationship with love changes completely. You stop measuring love by what you receive in return. You stop calculating whether it is worth loving someone based on the probability of them reciprocating. You stop keeping your heart as an investment that needs to return dividends. You love because love is what you are, not because love is what you can earn and this person who still lives in you. This love that persists against all logic taught you this even if you have not yet recognized the lesson. Showed you that you are capable of loving without guarantees, to continue loving through absence and loss, to hold someone in your heart not because there is hope of reconciliation, but because the love you feel is too true to be erased by mere external circumstances. And Simone Weil would say that this capacity, this ability to love without the need for reciprocity or presence, is one of the most precious qualities that human being can develop. It is a sign that you have touched something sacred, eternal, real, in a way that most never touch. And yes, it hurts. God knows it hurts, but pain does not invalidate value. Pain is the price you pay for having loved deeply enough to be transformed, and transformation is never comfortable, never easy. It always involves a kind of death of illusions, death of expectations. Death of the ego that thinks it can control love and relationships. But on the other side of this death, there is life fuller, more real, more connected with what really matters. And the second lesson that this persistent love came to teach you, a lesson that can only be learned through the direct experience of carrying someone inside you years after separation, is that you don't need another person to be complete. That loneliness you feel in the absence of that person is not a void that needs to be filled, but a sacred space where you can finally find yourself without mediation, without projection, without the need to define yourself through the eyes of another. And this sounds contradictory after everything we said about love that persists, after recognizing that that person has truly become part of you. But it is not a contradiction. It is a paradox. It is true that it contains two opposites simultaneously. Yes, that person has permanently marked you. Yes, part of them lives in you, but not that part that you need to be who you are. It is the part that shows you who you have always been. And when you understand the difference, when you can separate genuine love from the need for completeness, you discover that you can deeply miss someone while simultaneously being complete in yourself, that you can carry the presence of another in your heart while fully inhabiting your own. Singularity, and Simone Weil called it inhabited solitude, is the experience of being alone but not empty, separate but not isolated, unique but not lonely. And she discovered this state not in spite of her persistent loves, but through them. Because when you love someone you cannot have, when you continue to love through the impossibility of physical union, you are forced to find resources within yourself that you would never develop if someone else were always available to fill your voids. You learn to console yourself, to strengthen yourself, to understand yourself in ways that only solitude can teach. And strangely, counterintuitively, this love that persists in absence makes you more capable of being alone, because it shows you that true love does not depend on physical presence, that real connection transcends proximity, that you can carry someone in your heart as you walk your own path alone. And that is freedom that no one can take away from you. It is autonomy that comes not from denying love, but from loving in a way that does not imprison you in constant need for another. And the third lesson, perhaps most important of all, is that love that persists teaches you about the nature of time, shows you that linear time that we measure on clocks and calendars is not the only form of time, that there is another temporal dimension where past, present, and future coexist, where the person you loved 10 years ago is as present now as they were then, where separation is an illusion created by consciousness that can only focus on one moment at a time, but that does not reflect the totality of what is real. And Simone Weil was fascinated by this non-linearity of time, by moments when the past bursts into the present with such intensity that the distinction between then and now completely dissolves. And she saw these moments not as failure of memory or pathological nostalgia, but as glimpses of deeper truth about the nature of reality, as evidence that everything that has been genuinely experienced continues to exist somewhere. That nothing that was truly loved can be lost because love creates permanence that is outside of time. And when you have the experience of doing something completely mundane, washing dishes or driving or walking, and suddenly you are flooded with such a vivid memory of being with that person that for the moment you don't know where or when you are, when the boundary between then and now becomes porous, and you exist simultaneously in both times, you are directly experiencing what Weil was trying to describe. You are experiencing proof that love does not obey the laws of linear time, that real connections exist in eternity even when temporal circumstances change, and this is not escapism. It is not refusal to accept that a relationship has ended. It is recognition that the end of a relationship is not the end of love, that true love creates something that transcends the temporal duration of a specific relationship. And when you accept this, when you stop fighting against this non-linearity of time and of love, when you allow past and present to coexist within you without trying to force one to replace the other, you find strange peace. Peace that comes not from resolving contradiction, but from inhabiting it, from allowing truth to be paradoxical, from recognizing that you can simultaneously have moved on with life and still carry old love, that there is no contradiction in that, just the complexity of a complete human being. And these three lessons, love without possession, completeness in solitude, and transcendence of linear time, are what this persistent love came to teach you, and you don't learn them all at once. You don't wake up one day and suddenly understand everything. You learn them gradually, painfully, through years of carrying that love, through hundreds of moments when you miss someone and have to choose whether to resist to the feeling or allow it to exist, through countless nights when you wonder if it will ever stop hurting and you have to accept that it may not stop, but that you can learn to live with the pain. And Simone Weil does not promise that learning will be easy or quick. She does not offer shortcuts or techniques to speed up the process. She only testifies that the process is real, that pain has purpose, that love that persists is not a curse but a gift in disguise. And now we come to the most delicate point, the territory where most people give up, because that is where everything we learn about managing emotions and moving forward stops working. That's where you have to learn not to overcome love that persists, but to live with it, to carry it in a way that doesn't destroy you, but that also doesn't deny its reality. And Simone Weil developed specific practices for this type of coexistence, not self-help techniques to eliminate pain, but ways of being that allow you to live with dignity while you carry painful truth. And the first practice is morning attention to the absent presence, waking up and dedicating the first few minutes of the day simply recognizing that that person still lives in you, not to solve it, not to change it, just to see it clearly. You sit silently and name it internally. Today it is here. Today the lack is present. Today the love persists. No judgment about whether it is good or bad, right or wrong, healthy or unhealthy, just pure recognition of what is. And Weil would say that this attention without agenda, this ability to simply see without trying to fix it, is a form of acceptance that no words can express. It is allowing reality to be reality. And interestingly, when you do this consistently, when you start each day by acknowledging your heart's truth instead of trying to push it down or ignore it or convince yourself that you shouldn't feel what you feel, something starts to change. It's not that pain goes away, but that you develop a different relationship with it. It stops being an enemy to be fought, and it becomes part of the inner landscape that you inhabit. And second practice is finding beauty in the midst of absence. When the pain of missing is unbearable, when you are about to be engulfed by sadness, instead of resisting or being completely distracted, you find something genuinely beautiful. It may be sky through the window. It may be music that moves you. It may be poem or image or memory that carries real beauty, and you give it your full attention for 5 minutes, not as a distraction, but as a reminder that reality contains simultaneously pain and beauty, loss and grace, absence and presence. And Weil said that beauty is experimental proof that incarnation is possible, that spiritual can inhabit material, that transcendent can touch immanent. And when you allow beauty to exist alongside your pain, when you don't force one to cancel out the other, but allow both to be true simultaneously, you are practicing a form of acceptance that is deeper than resignation. You are saying yes to the whole of life, not just the comfortable parts. And the third practice is to let go of the narrative your mind tells you about persistent love, because your mind is constantly creating stories. This will never get better. I will always be like this. I should have done it differently. If I had one more chance, and these narratives are not true, they are fictions that ego counts on trying to control a situation that is beyond control. And practice is noticing when you are creating history and gently letting it go, over and over again, 1,000 times a day if necessary. It goes back to the raw sensation without interpretation. It goes back to the direct experience of loving and missing without adding a layer of meaning about what it says about you, or about the future, or about possibilities. And Weil called this decreation, it is undoing fiction that ego tells about itself. It is allowing experience to be experience without turning it into identity. And fourth practice is doing things of the day without demanding that they fill a void. You work, create, interact with people, live your life, but not with the expectation that these activities will make it painful to leave or replace someone you lost. You do it because it is what there is to do, because life goes on even when your heart still holds someone. And Weil would say that this is decreation in action. It is doing without seeking emotional reward. It is living without expectation that life owes you comfort or completeness. And strangely enough, when you stop demanding that days save you from pain, when you simply live each day as it comes, something softens. Not that you suddenly become happy, but that you find strange peace in the midst of pain, peace that comes from accepting what is, instead of constantly fighting against reality. And fifth practice is to consent to the day before you know what it will be like when you wake up. Before you know whether today will be a good day or a difficult day, a day of relative peace or a day of acute longing, you choose to accept whatever comes. It is not passive resignation, but an active act of love for reality. And when the day brings pain, when you go through a moment of missing so intense that it takes your breath away, you remember that you consented to it, that you chose to accept whatever came. And somehow this makes it bearable, makes the pain less violent because you are not being taken by surprise. You have already said yes to everything, including the pain. And the sixth practice is to write a letter to the love that persists once a week. Sit down with paper and write to person or for one's own love as if it were a separate entity. To be grateful for what you taught, to recognize the weight you still carry, to ask for strength to continue. It is not therapy in the conventional sense. It is a ritual of recognition. It is a way of honoring the truth of your heart without judgment. You write, "Dear person who still lives in me. Today I am carrying you with difficulty. Today the weight seems unbearable. Today I wish you were gone completely. But you are still here, and I accept that." You write without editing, without worrying about saying the right thing, just raw truth of what it's like to carry that love today. And then you burn the letter or keep it. It doesn't matter. What matters is the act of recognition, of giving voice to something that is usually trapped inside you without form. And the seventh practice is to be present with other people even when pain wants all your attention. When you are in conversation with someone and mind wants to return to the absent person, you notice impulse and gently return attention to whoever is present. Not because you are trying to forget or replace, but because you are practicing the love that Weil described. Love that is total attention to the other. Complete presence that temporarily decrees you, takes you away from the center of your own universe. And curiously, this type of attention to others is one of the few things that can give you genuine relief from the pain of persistent love. Not because it distracts, but because it reminds you that you are capable of loving in the present too. That the love you carry from the past did not incapacitate you for love in the present. It just changed its form. And the eighth and final practice is a nightly recognition ritual before going to sleep, recognizing three things: a truth that pain revealed today, a moment of grace even if tiny, a choice to remain, to continue living even when carrying weight, and you name it internally or write it briefly. Today, I saw that I can still feel deeply. Today, I had a moment of peace when the sun hit my face. Today, I chose to continue even when I wanted to give up. It is not forced gratitude or toxic positivity. It is honest recognition that even in the midst of pain, there are small lights, small truths, small choices that keep you alive and present. And these 8 practices will not cure you. They will not make persistent love disappear. They will not bring someone back or allow you to forget completely. But they can make a difference between sink and navigate, between being consumed by pain and learning to carry it with dignity. And Simone Weil promises no more than that. She does not offer easy solutions or miraculous transformations. She offers ways of being that honor the complexity of a human being who loves deeply, who feels deeply, who continues to carry what cannot be left behind. And now we have reached the end of this journey together. And I want to recognize something important. You have come this far. You have stayed with me through all this exploration of pain and persistence and love that never ends. And that says something. About you, it says that you have the courage to look at what hurts instead of constantly running away. That you are willing to recognize the truth of your heart even when that truth doesn't fit into comfortable narratives that society offers. That you are someone that Simone Weil would recognize as a companion on the journey. Someone who is not afraid to go deep into your own experience to find what is really true. And if you felt that something resonated here, if any of these words named experience that you live but never managed to express, if you recognized your own heart in this description of love that persists against all logic, so leave a like on this video because it shows me that these words are reaching those who really need them, those who are carrying love that has not ended, those who are living in the paradoxical territory between presence and absence. And subscribe to the channel because there are more such truths waiting to be explored. More territories of human experience that deserve to be recognized and honored. And you do not have to walk these journeys alone. And now allow me to offer final synthesis not as a tidy conclusion, but as an acknowledgement of what we have discovered together. The love you still feel is not a defect in your heart. It is not a sign that you are unable to move on or stuck in the past. It is evidence that you have truly loved in ways that have fundamentally changed who you are. And Simone Weil discovered that when you stop fighting against this persistence, when you accept that some loves simply don't end because they touch something eternal in you, when you consent to carry someone forever, not as a burden, but as part of who you have become, something impossible happens. You don't stop missing it. It doesn't stop hurting sometimes, but you learn to live fully while carrying that love. You learn that the human heart is big enough to simultaneously contain presence and absence, memory and present, pain and joy. And this ability to contain opposites, to live in paradox without the need for resolving it, is one of the highest forms of emotional maturity that a human being can achieve. It is wisdom that does not come from books, but from having loved and lost and continued loving through loss and the person you still carry within you. That love that persists despite all the logical reasons for having ended taught you this, showed you that you are capable of love that transcends circumstances, that survives impossibilities, that exists simply because it exists, without the need for justification or external validation. And that is a gift, not curse. It is proof of your ability to love deeply and truly. And yes, it hurts. And yes, it is difficult. And yes, sometimes you wish you could just turn off feeling and move on light and free. But if you did that, you would lose not only pain, but also beauty, depth, truth about who you really are. You would lose part of your humanity. And Simone Weil only lived 34 years. But in that short time, she loved with an intensity that most do not experience in their entire lives. She never had conventional relationships or tidy endings. She carried loves that persisted until her last day. And she did not see this as a failure, but as a grace, as a privilege of having loved in a way that transformed her soul permanently. And in the end, she wrote that love is direction, not state. That the important thing is not if you reach the object of your love, but if you maintain direction towards love, if you continue loving even when love hurts, even when love has nowhere to go, even when love persists without hope of satisfaction, because the act of loving is already complete in itself. It does not need a result to be valid, and perhaps that is what we are all looking for, not the absence of pain, but the ability to carry pain with truth and dignity. Not the end of love that persists, but peace with persistence. Not perfect closure, but acceptance that life rarely offers clean endings and that this is okay. That we can live fully even while carrying what cannot be left behind. That we can love in the present while holding on to love from the past. That there is no contradiction in this, just the complexity of being a complete human being. And you are not alone on this journey. There are others like you around the world carrying their own loves that persist, guarding their own absences, learning to live with hearts that contain much more than can fit into simple explanations. And Simone Weil would say that you all participate in something sacred, that the ability to love beyond circumstances, to maintain fidelity to the truth of your own heart even when no one else sees or understands, is one of the purest forms of human courage, and the love that you carry, however heavy it may be at times, is molding you into something that you cannot yet fully see, but that one day you will recognize is teaching you. Lessons that can only be learned through direct experience of persistence, is transforming you in ways that only time will fully reveal. So keep looking, keep feeling, keep living, keep loving even through absence, because that is exactly what Simone Weil would do, and the body may forget, but the soul keeps what has no end, and perhaps it is there, in this faithful guarding of the soul, that we find our true nature, our capacity to love without limits of time or space, our participation in the eternal through the temporal, and this is not a conclusion, but a beginning, not an answer, but invitation to keep asking. It's not a cure, but company in pain. And sometimes company is all we need. Someone who recognizes our pain without trying to fix it, who witnesses our persistence without judging it, who confirms that what we feel is real and valid and human. And that's what I tried to offer here. Not solutions, but re-knowledge. Not techniques, but understanding. Not the end of love that persists, but dignity in carrying it. And if this was helpful to you, if you felt a little less alone in your journey of loving beyond circumstances, then mission has been accomplished. Because in the end, Simone Weil teaches us that we are not here to solve everything. We are not here to have all the answers or achieve emotional perfection or live without contradictions. We are here to bear witness to truth, to love despite impossibilities, to continue even when the path is not clear. And you are doing that, you are living it. And that is enough. You are enough. And the love you carry is valid. And the pain you feel is real. And there is nothing wrong with you. You are simply being human in the deepest way possible, loving in the truest way possible, living with an open heart in a world that constantly tells us to close it down and that takes extraordinary courage. And you have that courage. The proof is in the fact that you are still here, still feeling, still loving, still living, even carrying what sometimes feels like a weight. Unbearable. And Simone Weil would be proud of you. She would be saying that you understood, that you saw what she tried to show, that some loves don't pass because they never actually end. And that is not a tragedy. It is a testimony to our capacity to love eternally. And now I leave you not with closure, but with openness, not with an end, but with an invitation to continue, not with a definitive answer, but with recognition that the journey continues, and you will continue to carry that love. And some days it will be easier, and some days it will be more difficult. But you are not alone. You never have been. You never will be. Because there is something about true love that connects all of us who love deeply, that makes us part of the invisible community of hearts that keep, souls that remember, people who keep loving even when everything says they should stop, and you belong to that community. And your persistent love is your entry card, your credential, your proof that you have truly lived and loved, and that is all any of us can hope to do in this brief and precious life. Truly love even if it hurts, especially because it hurts, because pain is the price we pay for having loved deeply, and it is a price that is worth every tear, every moment of longing, every moment of missing. Because the alternative would be to never have loved, and life without deep love, even love that persists painfully, is a diminished life, an impoverished life, a life that is not worth living. So be grateful for your pain, because it is evidence of your capacity to love. Honor your persistence because it shows the depth of your heart. Accept that some loves do not end because they were great too much to fit into linear time, and keep going, always keep going, because that's what we do. That's what it means to be human, to keep loving, to keep feeling, to keep living, even when, especially when, it's hard, and you are doing it beautifully, more beautifully than you perhaps recognize, and Simone Weil, wherever she is smiling.